Welcome to the Nature of Teaching Professional Development webinar series. My name is Lauren Teamy, and I'm the Ag and Natural Resources Educator for Purdue Extension in Delaware County. Today's webinar will cover the unit Animal Diversity and Tracking. This unit teaches students how to explore mammal diversity through track identification. Joining me today is Jared Brook. He's an Extension Wildlife Specialist for Purdue University. He's going to be introducing the unit, followed by some videos of the individual lesson activities. I will finish the webinar highlighting some additional resources and the procedure to obtain your certificate of completion for the webinar. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jared. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Lauren, and thanks for joining us. So we're going to be covering Unit 1, Animal Diversity and Tracking, and this is going to be part 2 of a 3-part series. And in this part, we're going to be covering Lesson 1, Animal Tracks, Lesson 2, Scent Station, and Lesson 5, Animal Tracking. And so, like I said, this is part 2, and the first part of the webinar, you will find a kind of a deep dive into the parts of a wildlife or animal track and the types of tracks and how to actually go about tracking various wildlife species and identifying different wildlife species by their tracks. So it serves as really good background information that will be helpful as you watch both this webinar and the part 3 webinar. And the part 3 webinar goes into lessons 3 and 4 of animal diversity and tracking, which are the indoor and outdoor track casting. So again, this first webinar is going to, second webinar is going to cover lessons 1, 2, and 5. This unit as a whole covers grade levels from K to 5. It has 5 different lessons that range in time anywhere between 30 and 90-minute lessons, depending on which lesson you use. And some lessons may actually require more than one day to complete them. Not a day's in length, but you may have to come back the next day and visit, especially lesson 2 scent stations. So the objectives of the unit are to identify wildlife species by using their tracks and actually just recognize what a track is and be able to define a track. And then also recognize that animal diversity can be high even when we don't see animals. You also use tracks in this lesson to predict which species tracks you're likely to find based on their habitat requirements. And then also you'll be creating molds of tracks and trying to interpret animal behavior based on tracks that you find out in nature. So this lesson covers a series of next generation standards, both in science, English language arts, and math. And you can see from this overview page here, if you scroll down and hover your mouse over these different standards, it will actually take you, it's a hot link to take you to the actual standard. So you can see that, next gen, lesson 1 covers next gen science standards there. And if you click on that, it'll actually take you to that standards page so you can better understand what standards are covered in the various lessons. So you'll need some reference materials to help you kind of guide you through this unit. These are very helpful. The first one is this publication from Purdue Extension, Nature of Teaching, which is Common Indiana Mammals. You can see the cover of that publication there. You can find that on the Nature of Teaching website. And then also, if you go through and watch that Animal Diversity and Tracking webinar, part 1, we'll give you a lot of good background information about parts of tracks, track types, and how to identify certain species by their track. This Common Indiana Mammals is also good in that it'll show you, and this is a screen grab of that publication here, it'll actually show you what the tracks look like, and then it'll give you a bunch of background information of that species in general. So how big it is, how much it weighs, what the skull looks like, the teeth formula, and ecology and behavior and its range. So a lot of good background information about Indiana mammals in that publication. So the first lesson is really just kind of introducing the concept of animal tracks, right? So we're going to introduce the term track, which is just a footprint made by an animal. And then you're going to ask students where they might be able to find tracks when they're out in nature. by a stream, in the mud and snow, things like that. The materials that you'll need for this lesson are going to be a pencil and a ruler, that common Indiana Mammals publication, a track field guide. I have a mammal track and signed field guide here, which is a good one, but you can find lots of them online. And then the publication that's good to have as well, or the book, is this Big Tracks, Little Tracks. It's another good book to have to introduce the concept of animal tracks. And so in this lesson plan, you're going to be going through the different foot types, which can include things like plantigrade, digitigrade, and ungulatigrade. And those terms are defined in the lesson, and they're also defined and detailed in that Animal Diversity and Tracking Part 1 webinar. And I will let Bob here kind of describe Lesson 1 and give you a little bit of a sneak peek into what to expect.
Greetings, I'm Bob Cordes, Special Projects Coordinator for the Maine Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife. Our department has partnered with Purdue University on the nature of teaching. I'm here to introduce Lesson 1, Animal Tracks, of the unit Animal Diversity and Tracking. So this lesson is all about animal tracks. We'll learn about foot types, parts of the track. We'll take measurements of tracks and learn tracks. A great way to introduce that to students is through this resource, Big Tracks, Little Tracks, Following Animal Prints, or another grade level appropriate book. So an important component to this lesson is for students to take simple measurements of the track, including length and width, and compare them to other tracks that they take measurements on, or to a reference source. So that was a brief introduction to Lesson 1, Animal Tracks. Hopefully you find animal tracks as interesting as I do. And if you want to get your kids outside and do this lesson, go to purdue.edu/nature to download the lesson plan.
So that was just a little introduction to that first lesson, which is really going to introduce the concept of animal tracks. And the nice thing about this unit is that each lesson builds upon the previous one or the previous few. So they're really nice to use in sequence. So the second lesson is scent stations, which a scent station is basically a pile or a ring of sand that you put out in the environment, and you put a scent inside of that ring of sand. And as animals come to check that scent, as they're attracted to that scent, they deposit their track in that sand. And we can come back and actually identify which species of mammals in particular have visited that site based on the tracks that were left. And this is really an outdoor activity. It does require a fair amount of materials, but they're all materials that you can easily find at your local hardware store, local home goods store as well. So what you'll need is a 50-pound bag of sand, a yardstick, scent or bait. And scent or bait can be as simple as grabbing a little bit of vanilla from your kitchen cabinets. Vanilla can be really attractive to a variety of wildlife species, or even grabbing something like cologne or perfume, because there's compounds in cologne and perfume that are attractive to some of our cat species. So if you're in a forested area, you may be able to attract things like bobcats by using cologne. You're gonna want a flour sifter to help sift the sand, a pencil, ruler, notebook paper, the scent stations data sheet, which is gonna be inside the lesson, inside the unit, and then the Common Indiana Mammals publication, and then some sort of track ID field guide. So I will let Bob, again, walk you through how to construct a scent station. And this video here is a really good video to watch as the instructor, or even watch with your class, because it really lets students know how to make a scent station. And this is freely available on YouTube, so you can go download it and watch it there.
Welcome to the Nature of Teaching series. Today we're going to demonstrate the setup and evaluation of a scent station, which is Lesson 2, in Unit 1 of Animal Diversity and Tracking, part of the Nature of Teaching series, available on the website listed below. In Lesson 1, you learned about animal tracks. A scent station is a technique we can use animal tracks to determine the diversity of animals on your land or school property. So why do we rely on tracks? Often animals are secretive, nocturnal, or they may be very rare. Scent stations are an efficient tool to determine the presence of animals by the tracks they leave behind when you're not able to observe the animal itself. And what's great about scent stations is they're easy to construct and you only need a few materials. You need a 50-pound bag of sand, a meter or yardstick, a vial or a cap to put your lure or attractant in, a flour sifter, a pencil, a ruler, a notebook, and a data sheet. And if your ID skills for tracks aren't great, there's plenty of guides out there to help you determine what animal left the track. It's very important to choose the right site for your scent station. And what to look for is the intersection of two habitats, corridors, animal trails, anywhere you think the animal is likely to travel during the day or night. So today we've chosen a location for our station at the intersection of two trails. Another important feature of this spot is that it's flat and relatively free of large debris, which is important for establishing the base of your station. So the first step is to prepare your site bed. We're going to move large debris, take our board, and clear all the debris in a 1 meter radius. Now that your site's prepared, we want to pour the sand. Be sure to leave about 1/3 of your bag for top sifting later. Now that your sand's poured, we'll want to take our board, smooth it out, and ensure that you have nice crisp edges. Now that you have your sand smooth, our next step is to take a cap, place it in the center of the station, add our attractant. So the reason why our station is 1 meter in diameter is we want to ensure that we're attracting the animal and he deposits a track in our sand. Sometimes when making the scent station, there's minor imperfections into the sand. So as a final step, we want to take our sifter and just clean up some of those imperfections so we have a nice, smooth final surface. Now our scent station is finalized. We're ready to see what's on our school property. We're going to leave the station set at least overnight, 24-hour period, and check it for the next several days. It's been 24 hours. Let's check our scent station, see if we've had any visits. And indeed we have. We have a couple of different tracks here, and this is the time where you want to get out your ruler and your track ID guide. So we have a raccoon, some eastern gray squirrel, and there's a couple sets of bird tracks in our station. So now we need to record the data on the data sheet, which is available on the website, Nature of Teaching. Now we're ready to reset our station. Take a little bit of sand in your sifter, cover up all those tracks, and again, make a final smooth surface. At this point, it's also a good idea to refresh your attractant. So now you know the basics of making a scent station. You're ready to go and try out different habitats, different lures, to see the true diversity of animals at your school property. Well, thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you again on the Nature of Teaching series.
All right, great. So that's kind of just a nice overview of how to build a scent station. As Bob said in there, there's different things you can do at scent stations to really expand on them. And the nice thing about scent stations is you don't have to have, big, large school property or big forest behind your school in order to use them. You can actually set these up, right on your school grounds. If you have access to a local park or things like that, you can do that as well. But even on some of our more urban school properties, you'd be amazed at what kind of species of wildlife and animals you might find on your site. You may get things like raccoons, possums, maybe a coyote, or some of our feral cats or dogs running through. So you can get a lot of different species, even if you don't have access to a forested or a prairie property or anything like that. And it pairs nicely with that Common Indiana Mammals publication so that you can use the track guide in there to help identify what wildlife species are leaving tracks. So lessons 3 and 4 are track casting, and those are covered by that Animal Diversity Tracking Part 3 webinar, which will give you more information about how to do indoor and outdoor track casting. So the last lesson in this unit builds upon all of the 4 previous lessons and kind of puts all the information that you have learned to use in trying to identify animal tracks out in nature, ones that you might find, but it also builds on concepts that help you not only identify the animal by their track, but also helps you understand maybe what that animal is doing, if they're running, walking, trotting, those things. And it kind of introduces a few terms and concepts, things like stride, which stride would be the distance between the front and back paw on an animal. Straddle would be the distance from the left to right foot on a set of tracks. And then things like gait. So what was that animal doing? You can tell that by the distance between tracks, if the animal was walking, running, and things like that. You can also identify direction of movement, so where that animal is moving. And so this is really an outside activity, and the materials that you're going to need for this are the habitat sketch worksheet and the animal tracking worksheet, which are in the unit, a pencil, a clipboard, notebook paper, ruler, yardstick, and some sort of track field guide. And so I'll let Bob kind of walk you through this lesson plan and how you might use it.
Hi, I'm Bob Cordes, Special Projects Coordinator for the Maine Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife. Our department has partnered with Purdue University with the nature of teaching. I'm going to introduce to you Lesson 5, Animal Tracking, of the unit Animal Diversity and Tracking. Lesson 5, Animal Tracking, is the last lesson in the unit Animal Tracking to Diversity. And this lesson incorporates all the skills that a student would have learned through the previous 4 lessons. And we'll take that and we can incorporate track measurements. We can use behavioral measurements like the stride and straddle. And here we have some deer tracks, and we can determine the straddle and the stride length and help the students investigate how that animal is interacting in its environment, its behaviors, what habitats it's using, and increase their investigative tools and skills. Thanks for joining me on this brief introduction to Lesson 5, Animal Tracking. As you can see, this is a great way to incorporate all their skills about tracking and get the students more interested in interacting with their surrounding environment. To learn more about this lesson and others, go to purdue.edu/nature. Hi.
Okay, so that's just a little background about the lesson 5. And here's the data sheets you're going to use, the animal activity tracking, and the habitat sketch. And so really, I like this lesson a lot because it allows students to be a little creative, kind of builds in some art and English language arts standards and things into this lesson plan. And so what the students would do is, as they find tracks out in the environment, they would draw the habitat or the ecosystem where they find those tracks. So maybe they find them by a stream or in a woodlot. They can draw that to help them connect where those tracks are found with the habitat on their school property. It also allows them to classify and measure and identify tracks on that data sheet. And then it brings in some creative skills in that the students can use that information, the data they collect about the gait, about the direction, and about what species they find, to kind of build a story about what they think the animal is doing as it left the track. Maybe it was walking through to find some food. Maybe it was running through to escape a predator. Allows them to have some creativity and freedom to kind of build a story around the tracks that they find. And so with that, this is just kind of a brief overview of lessons 1, 2, and 5. of the Animal Diversity and Tracking Unit 1. Back to you, Lauren.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Jared. Ooh, squeaky desk. So I do have a couple questions for you, if you have a minute still, of course.
Absolutely.
So first off, can you discuss how you might make some of these a little bit more advanced for maybe older youth, or and then also the opposite direction. So even in this picture right here, the stage of wonder, pretty young. How would you adjust it for different age groups?
Yeah, so we get that question a lot. As far as the lessons is built, it's built for K through 5, but it's has the ability to expand it easily either way, younger or older. We'll start with older first. Some of the ways that we have done it ourselves or seen other educators do to expand it is, especially related to the scent station, like you see the picture there. You can do different experiments with scent stations. You can do experiments by placing them in different ecosystems. So if you place some on your school property, maybe you can place some in a wood lot that you might have access to, or you can place some near like a grassland or prairie. And then you can kind of look and see what different wildlife species are using those different areas and kind of get an idea of the wildlife diversity you might expect in an urban area versus a wooded area versus a grassland area. And you can also do experiments by changing lures. So you could set several different scent stations up, and you can have different lures or scents in each one. So maybe one you have vanilla, one you have some sort of cologne, another one you actually get some sort of lure that you could buy on like a trapping supply website. And then you can look and see, okay, which types of wildlife species are attracted to different wildlife species, right? Or sorry, to different lures, which can tell you, it's a great experiment to try just to see what kind of wildlife you can attract and how they are attracted to different lures. You can also set up a trail camera, so a game camera or a trail camera on a scent station, and that will kind of help you identify what wildlife species are there as well. So you could first try to identify what wildlife species visited the scent station by looking at the tracks left in the scent station. And then you could confirm whether or not you correctly identified the wildlife species by taking a look at the trail camera pictures to see what wildlife species moved through, which can be a good way to kind of check your ID skills, your track ID skills. Now, if you go the other way, to make it a little simpler, you can just go through and some of the lessons, like the lessons 3 and 4 that are covered in another webinar, you can make those more of an art project than a track identification project. So you could decorate the track molds and track casts you make. Even scent stations, like you see here, that's a picture of me with my, at that time, 2.5-year-old son out there just looking at scent stations. And so, he helped me build it. He wasn't a whole lot of help because he just wanted to play in the sand, but I let him, stomp around in his boots to see what tracks he left. And then we tried to look and just, let him know that different wildlife species actually make tracks, not try to identify any tracks, but just using it as a way to just introduce the concept of tracks and track ID.
Yeah, because then you could easily measure a boot print. It's going to be nice and thick, very
Exactly,
pronounced. Yeah, that's a good one. So the next question I have for you, so this includes adding sand to another location. I'm going to take a stab and say that you are currently in your backyard in this picture, in this screenshot. So you probably didn't have to worry about that. But some different places like state parks might have leave no trace laws. Can you discuss a little bit about that?
Yeah, so you're right. This is my backyard, so I only had to ask myself and my wife permission to put sand out in our backyard, so we were okay there. But obviously, you're going to want to get permission wherever you're placing these, whether it's on your school grounds or whether it's on nearby nature park or whatever. You're going to want to ask permission to place sand out in the environment. And you're only placing a little bit, so it shouldn't be a huge endeavor you're undertaking, so it's not going to have a huge impact on the environment once you leave. But other ways you can do it is actually you can just find a muddy spot and put some sort of scent in a muddy location. And that way, as animals walk through that muddy spot, they're attracted to it because you have the scent there and they're leaving the track there. So that's kind of the way to utilize what you have available. Also, if you have an area that has like a natural or not, maybe you have a playground that has a sandy area, you can set these up in that sand in the playground to try to use the scent station or use the animal tracks to your advantage in that sand that's already there. So there's ways to modify it if you don't want to have to bring in sand and add it.
Okay, great. Because we've had that question come up a few times, and even trying to find, a nature preserve that would let us do this activity. And I know that other folks might have the same issue. So
yeah, even like if you're fortunate enough to have, a creek or stream running through a property, then setting up on a sandbar in that creek can be a really good way to do it as well.
Great, thank you. Those are all really good modifications. And then the last one that I have, what are some other just places that you would recommend doing this? So between, putting the sand part, you just had some different modifications for that portion of the unit. But what about when it comes to walking off trails? If that makes sense. So like animal tracking, right? So
yeah.
Sometimes those go off of a trail. So how would you approach another location and say, hey, what are your rules for this? Or is it just simply that? Ask them.
Yeah, I would ask them wherever you're putting it, ask them what their rules are about locating things off trails or walking off trails. A lot of nature preserves want you to walk on the trails alone to limit your impact. And that may not be the worst thing, because even if they're walking trails for people, if you can just set a scent station right off that walking trail for people, while people are walking there through the day, a lot of different wildlife species are lazy, and so they will take the path of least resistance. So while people are walking in the day, there's all kinds of wildlife that are using it as a travel corridor throughout the night or evening, or even early morning. So you're still going to get a lot of wildlife moving through there. Setting this up around water, if possible, is a good case, because especially if you can find a natural wildlife crossing, maybe around a rocky area of a stream, can be good. Setting them up outside of what may be like a den for something, maybe a fox den or coyote den, can be really interesting, because then you may get some of those, you may see what is actually using that den. We can get permission first for wherever you're placing them.
Great, thanks. Do you have any other final notes for our viewers?
It's a fun thing to do, and it gives the kids a workout to move 50 pounds of sand around too.
Noted for these kindergartners, right?
That's right.
All right. Thank you again, Jared, for joining us, and thank you everybody else for joining us for this Nature of Teaching Professional Development webinar covering the unit Animal Diversity and Tracking. If you enjoyed this webinar, I encourage you to click on the card in the top right of your screen to visit our Nature of Teaching YouTube channel. Here you can view sneak peeks of lesson plans that are directly related to the webinar you just completed. To obtain your certificate of completion for this webinar, please click on the second card in the top right of your screen. Jared, if you want to advance that, perfect. Here you'll be directed to a short Qualtrics survey to provide us some feedback on the program. Once that is completed, you'll be automatically emailed your certificate of completion. And with that, we hope again that you enjoyed learning with us and consider participating in additional professional development webinars offered by the Nature of Teaching team. Until then, thank you for engaging our youth with nature.